Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. Welcome to Kentucky Newsmakers and hope you're enjoying your weekend. A little bit later, Kentucky's public universities and colleges want to make a deal with Frankfurt. They hope to get more money if they agree to live up to some promises. That's later, but first, your chance to meet Kentucky's new state treasurer. Alison Joy Ball is a 34-year-old Republican lawyer from Prestonsburg who campaigned on making the job more significant. You may recall a few years ago, the GOP nominee for that office said the treasurer's duties could easily be transferred over to the Department of Revenue and other places and the office be eliminated. And we get every indication that Treasurer Ball, though, will take a different approach to that and see the job as a watchdog for taxpayers. State Treasurer Alison Ball joining us on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Bill. It's good to be here.
Well, congratulations on your victory and your inauguration.
Thank you.
What brought you into politics and now elected to statewide office at a relatively young age?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think I've always been sort of politically minded, politically involved. I love history, and I've always loved economics, so it's just kind of a natural bent to be interested in that. And I've always been involved, even though I'm from a Democrat county. I've had to kind of go elsewhere to be involved in people's races, but I've always been involved. Was
that tough to be? You're from Floyd County, being a Republican in Floyd County?
Well, I think you learn. I tell people that I make everything bipartisan whenever I show up in Floyd County because it's almost 90-10 Democrat Republican, and I come from a heavily Democrat family. My family have all been Democrat office holders there, so you learn how to work with everybody, and that's probably actually great training for being in the office that I'm in now because I want to work with everybody.
What was it like to travel the state and run that statewide campaign?
It was a great experience. I think it's a good thing to do when you're in your 30s because it's a lot of sleepless nights where you're driving and not a lot of time to eat, but you have a great time just meeting with people. And I think someone told me in the course of the campaign that everybody should do this at least once in their life because it makes you a better person. You build great relationships. So it was a great experience.
You've said that you want to be more aggressive, make the treasurer more significant, and be a watchdog for the state's financial dealings, make things more transparent.
That's right.
What are some of the things that you'll be looking to do in those regards?
Well, Bill, I'm glad you used the word watchdog because that's what I used the whole time in the campaign. And you mentioned earlier people have been sort of frustrated with the office for a long time, and I think it's because it's been a rubber stamp position, and it really shouldn't be. It was created in the Constitution. It has a constitutional obligation to be that watchdog on our spending, making sure that the only money that's spent, the treasurer is the one who cuts the checks for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the only money that goes out is money that is constitutional, appropriated correctly, it's statutory, and so you really do need someone actually keeping an eye on it. And I was actually meeting with my staff yesterday about something that I kind of think may be a constitutional issue, and so we're figuring out exactly what to do with that legally. So you want somebody who's actually taking that role responsibly, and I do want to do that. I do think being a watchdog also means increasing transparency. Ohio has done a fantastic job on transparency up there. Their treasurer has created a great website, and I'm looking to try and see what we can do in Kentucky. They spent a lot of money on theirs, and we are not as financially ready to spend lots of money, but there are things we can do. And I want to increase that transparency.
By the time the state cuts a check, it hopefully has been through some approval process.
It's me.
But do you plan to, to have some process where you check as many expenses as you can?
Yes, there are some things that we really do need to be keeping an eye on, and there's, like I said, there's one thing in particular that we're looking at legally. And once we've come to a decision on that, well, I'll let you guys know what we decide. But yes, you actually do need somebody who is keeping an eye on it. And as a bankruptcy attorney, I'm very used to keeping an eye on finances. I'm very used to fixing financial problems. So this is the sort of thing that I'm well trained and prepared to do.
So you're saying that as a state treasurer, there will be times when if something doesn't pass the smell test for you, as far as that your signature going on a check that is to be cut, you'll hold it up.
I do think I've got an obligation to do that, yes.
As a bankruptcy attorney, as you said, you've seen people in tough situations, sometimes of their own making, obviously,
sometimes,
and you've helped them to, create a budget and get on a better footing. Kentucky's retirement shortfalls are just horrific at this point. How will you assist in trying to help with those?
I'm glad you mentioned that too, and that actually is one of the main initiatives that I'm going to work on as state treasurer. The treasurer sits in the Kentucky Teachers Retirement System Board, so I have some direct relationship to that pension system. The other pension system, which is actually in greater trouble, the one that's for most government employees, that one is in pretty bad shape. I don't have a direct relationship with that one, but I want to from an advocacy position. So we're already working on some ideas that we have for pension reform, and I do want to make sure we're transparent and shining a light on the way it's done. So being on the board of KTRS, I can do that in a very, I think, effective way. I've actually spent a couple days up in Tennessee already, meeting with their state treasurer, seeing how they do their pension system, and they're doing a great job. And so I'm taking some ideas away from that, and we're getting ready to meet with some office holders here to try and reform some things and work on some stuff.
You will also have a powerful position on the Kentucky Lottery Board.
That's true.
Do you believe that Kentucky is getting what it can out of the lottery, that things are going well there? As you know, there's a lot of attention on it now with anytime there's a huge jackpot like the one that was available going into this weekend.
Yeah, well, I think we do need to have some eyes on that and making sure that it's fulfilling, because it was created to fulfill a certain purpose. And I think that we need somebody who is watching that and making sure that's happening. I think we can increase transparency on that board. So I'm eager to work on that lottery board and be a good voice for fiscal responsibility, which is what I believe in, and what the obligation is that they're supposed to be fulfilling.
The Commonwealth of Kentucky holds a lot of property that has been turned over to the Treasurer's office.
True.
Do you, and many treasurers have tried different ways to get that returned to the rightful owners. Do you have a plan in place to do that?
Yeah, well, we're obviously going to continue the unclaimed property, and I'm not sure if your viewers know what that is, but you're right. If people have property that for some reason they don't know that they own, it goes to the state, and the state's kind of a steward of it. So I am going to be working on that and making sure people's property goes back to them. I don't want the state holding on to things that it doesn't own. And I'm a big believer in property rights, and I think that's important to get people's money back to them.
You've been elected at a time of a lot of political energy in Frankfort, with a lot going on, battles between the parties and so forth. Do you intend to be a part of that, or will you stay back in the Treasurer's office and away from those things?
Well, I will be involved because, you know, I'm part of this new wave. I'm the third youngest statewide office holder in the country. I'm the youngest female statewide office holder. You know, my good friend Ryan Quarles is the youngest statewide office holder. So we've got some young energy on the Republican side, and I'm eager to be a part of that wave and help grow some conservative policies and people that believe in that.
Is this a political beginning for you?
Well, we'll see. I want to do a good job as treasurer right now, so that is the focus.
Can you see potentially seeking higher office at some time?
We'll see. We'll see. You know, I want to make sure this is done right, and so that's my focus right now.
We appreciate you coming in today. Alison Ball, the new Kentucky State Treasurer. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Coming back on WKYT in just a moment, and we're going to talk about this promise that Kentucky's colleges and universities are making to lawmakers if they'll give them more money to operate their institutions. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. It appears the state's universities and colleges are hoping to make a deal with the governor and the legislature. They want some of the deep cuts to higher education of recent years to be restored, and in exchange they're willing to make some performance promises. The Council on Post-Secondary Education, which oversees higher ed, says Kentucky is losing out on more than $900 million a year because the state has fewer college graduates than the national average. But over the last 7 years, funding to the state's public universities and colleges has been cut by more than $173 million. The council says that has shifted the burden directly to students and their families with much higher tuition and fees. And many Kentucky college graduates start out life deep in debt. Joining us is the Council on Post-Secondary Education President Robert L. King, and we appreciate you coming in today. Thanks for being here, Mr. President. Paint the picture, if you will, as to why you think it is important that some of these cuts of recent years to higher education be restored.
Well, the simple reason is that if Kentucky intends to be a competitive economy in the 21st century, it has to have a workforce capable of meeting the needs of 21st century globally competitive employers. What we know, and this is true across the country, is that our workforce, the skills that it needs, the knowledge that it needs, requires at least some education beyond high school. A high school diploma is no longer enough to provide to somebody and their family essentially a living wage. And so the personal needs of our citizens and the larger needs of the state's economy demand this, and this is why we feel so strongly about it.
What have these institutions had to do to absorb these cuts?
Well, frankly, a number of things. The first is they've had to reduce the number of full-time faculty. Second, they delay purchases of equipment that are important to be able to train our students on modern tools that they will use eventually in the workplace. They delay the development of facilities. All of these things conspire to reduce our effectiveness and our ability to better serve students.
You say that the presidents have come together, and under your guidance you have come up with, and I called it a deal, an agreement that you're willing to approach the legislature and the governor with, and that is that you would live up to certain commitments if they will restore, what, half the cuts?
That's right. There's a notion out there that is being utilized in a number of states where you tie a portion of university funding to performance. And what we've proposed to the governor and to the legislature is that if they would restore half of the money that's been cut since the recession, that we would tie the ongoing capacity of the universities to retain that money to the achievement of specific performance goals. It includes goals in terms of number of degrees and credentials produced, improving graduation rates, closing achievement gaps, those kinds of things. And what we've done, and we're in the process of doing this right now, is for each one of those measures is setting specific targets for each campus. And so if over the next 2 years, if the government were to fund this, if a campus, let's say, achieves 70% of the goals that were set, they would get to keep 70% of the money in their base budget. If they don't achieve any portion of it, that money then comes back to a pot, but we would give the campus a second chance. And essentially what we would say to them is, look, in the first biennium, you aspired to achieve these objectives. You got 70% of the way there, but the 30% you didn't achieve means that you have to change strategies in some way. If you can come up with a credible plan to do that, we'll give you a second chance to earn the money. Again, if they do that, we give them the second chance. If they achieve it, great, they keep the money. If not, then the money is lost to their base budget. So
if they do not meet these goals that they are promising the legislature and the governor that they will meet, they don't get their money.
They don't get all of it. They don't get what we've asked for is this: restore the money in this upcoming biennium so that the campuses can use those funds to develop or implement the things they need to improve performance. If they fail to meet the targets, where that money would ordinarily just stay in their base budget, the money comes out of the base budget in proportion to the targets that they didn't achieve.
So they wouldn't get it going forward.
That's right.
Would be what would happen. What do you say to those who would push back, though, and say that our institutions need to be leaner, we need to have less duplication of programs across the state? That, of course, is your job to kind of manage all of that. Right. So what do you say when that response is given? Well,
let me tell you this. We did an analysis just last year, and what people, I think, often don't understand is, in addition to taking $175 million in cuts, our enrollment grew by 10,000 additional students. That's number one. Number two, the legislature has imposed some new expenses on the campuses. The new pension cost is well over $100 million of new expenditures. The legislature has shifted the responsibility of paying for the maintenance and operation of new buildings, which used to be picked up by the state's general fund, now shifted to the campus operating budgets with no money to support it. That's $150 million. Inflation, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, health insurance for our workforce. All of those things are driving expenses. And then finally, what the campuses are doing is increasing the amount of financial aid that they provide to students coming to the campuses, either through scholarships or direct grants of one sort or another. That's about $250 million. So we looked at the aggregate impact of all of that over the last 7 or 8 years. It's about $3.5 billion. We then subtracted from that the amount of new tuition we allowed the campuses to charge. That was about $2.5 billion. So there's a $1 billion gap. The campuses have had to make up that $1 billion, and they're doing it through becoming leaner by weeding out programs for which students are not taking advantage of or aren't interested in, delaying purchases, reducing the number of full-time faculty. But all of that is having an impact on our capabilities to continue to improve at very high rates.
Would you say some of them have been innovative, though, as they have moved forward with some privatization? For instance, the deal that has gotten these new dormitories at UK, and now EKU is about to embark on the same venture?
Well, all of those things are evidence of the kinds of innovative thinking that's going on the campuses to essentially to make ends meet, and at the same time meet the needs of our students. One of the most innovative programs at the University of Kentucky, for example, is they developed a new way of monitoring the utilization of pharmaceuticals by people in their health care plan. They were able to save close to $100 million. As a result, now other campuses, and I believe the teachers' retirement system, is using the model that UK developed to save expenses there. So it's things like that. The expanded use of online learning has a place. It's not a complete replacement for all learning, but it does help. So all of those things are part and parcel of what's going on. And so when people think that the campuses aren't being efficient, of course you could look at any large institution and say, you know, you could do this a little better, you could do that a little better. But on balance, they've had to find a way over this 8-year period to reduce their spending or find new sources of revenue besides tuition and besides state support to the tune of $1 billion.
And as you said, some of them have cut some programs and made changes and so forth. But to what extent do you, as sort of the governance of all of the universities, have a responsibility to say, well, if there is one program, you know, in one part of the state, maybe students will just have to travel to that rather than offer it at various campuses, if it is a, you know, not a large program or large enrollment?
You know, it's a really good question. Kentucky's practice, long before I got here, was to have that kind of duplication because there was a sense that families didn't want their kids going too far from home. And so if we have a program in one part of the state, we better have it in another part of the state. There's a certain value to that because it does address kind of this notion that many of our students and their parents have. At the same time, you know, how many masters of business education do we really need? Or right now we're looking at, there's a new degree called a Doctor of Nursing Practice, okay? So what we do now is as campuses come forward and say we want to implement or offer this program at our campus, one of the things we make them do before we approve it is say, is there a market to support it? How do you know that the programs that are at Campus X or Campus Y of the similar type won't meet the needs of the state? And so we are making those assessments, and we have on occasion had to say no to a campus and say, look, we don't need another program of that type.
So do institutions have to get your approval before they start, even a major?
They do.
You know, there's this gaming major that's now being offered, for instance, at Eastern, and so they justify to you that there are potential jobs available in that?
They have to demonstrate first that they've got the financial and academic capacity to offer the program, and that the program meets recognized standards for whatever the industry might be that they want to serve. They then have to demonstrate there's a market, that there's a sufficient demand, that the program will actually satisfy that demand and not saturate the market with too many seats for that program and not enough students. And then third, we want to make sure that there's a market for our students upon graduation. So all of those things now are part and parcel of the review that we do.
Well, you know that Governor Bevin gave a speech this week in which he said that these are going to be leaner times. He says that he has received requests for $2 billion in extra spending, and he indicates that that won't be done, that the pension program is going to have to be a priority to try to shore up these pensions, and that it is unlikely that he'll approve much new spending. Hearing that, does that change your approach in any way, or what would you say to the governor?
Well, first, we all understand the challenges that the governor and the General Assembly are facing, particularly around pensions and around the Medicaid expansion. It's the reason, frankly, that when we were first talking about a budget request, we were talking about asking for restoration of the full amount of the cuts, like the K-12 system did in the last budget cycle. But we came to the conclusion that given all of these other pressures, that it was unlikely and unreasonable to be asking for that much additional resources. At the same time, the reality is that if this state intends to be a competitive economy and to have citizens who can enjoy the prosperity that I think everybody aspires to have, doesn't mean that everybody has to be rich, but be able to afford a home and a car and make sure your kids are well cared for. We will simply not be able to do that if we don't have the workforce sufficient to attract the employers who pay those kinds of wages.
What do you say to some who say, well, that is not always a college degree?
Well, you know, it used to be the case that you could finish high school and go work in a factory somewhere, right? Or go work in a coal mine somewhere. The reality today is that the people who work in factories, the people who are working in the coal mines that are left, are very highly skilled people that have some level of education beyond high school. I've taken a couple of tours at the Toyota plant, and the people who work on that line and the people who have to maintain the line and operate it are very highly skilled people with backgrounds in understanding pneumatics, understanding electronics, understanding computing, understanding, you know, all the mechanical and electrical elements that go into that. Working in healthcare today requires higher and higher levels of training. There are estimates that you see from around the country from very esteemed places that say for here in Kentucky, 63% of the workforce in Kentucky by the year 2020 or 2025 is going to require some post-secondary education.
But Mr. King, are we doing a good job of preparing the students who are going to college and seeking a better way for the jobs that are available in Kentucky? Do you hear from the employers that they have jobs available but cannot find qualified applicants?
I do. Will James, who's was the plant manager for many years, he now has a higher position at Toyota, said to us recently that there were, if not hundreds, several thousand jobs in Kentucky for which they cannot find employees in the manufacturing sector.
And how is higher education dealing with that?
Well, first we've got to attract more people into higher ed. Number two, we've got to keep them so that they complete their degrees and then can go into the workforce. And the other thing that we're doing, which is vitally important, is working very closely with K-12. One of the things we know is that we have a responsibility in higher ed to produce the most effective teaching corps that we can for our public school system. We're working on that vigorously. There's a group that's starting next week, as a matter of fact, to completely rethink how we meet that challenge. Because at the end of the day, the public school system is dependent on the quality of its teachers, quality of its building principals. We have a responsibility to produce for them the very best and most effective teachers we can. In turn, if they produce students who are ready to do college level work, we can then be much more successful.
And as I understand, that also includes the so-called soft skills, being responsible, showing up on time and so forth, and a lot of employers say that is a huge issue today.
Well, it is, and we don't call them soft skills anymore, we call them essential skills, but working in teams, being responsible, having the self-discipline it takes to show up at work every day, to show up dressed properly, to be able to speak and communicate effectively, working in teams, are all important things, and things that we can do, by the way, just by simply embedding them into the regular curriculum.
All right, President Robert L. King is with us. He oversees Kentucky's systems of universities and colleges. We're back in just a moment on WKYT, and we'll finish up with him. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. The president of the post-secondary education system in Kentucky, Robert King, is with us today. We've been talking about the needs of higher education going forward and about their promise to try to live up to some goals that they would set at the various institutions. How do you plan to communicate your proposal to lawmakers?
Well, there's a formal mechanism which we have already undertaken. This was the product of a year-long set of negotiations with the presidents and their chief business officers, chief academic officers. We send a formal budget proposal to the governor and to the General Assembly, so they have that. We will be out speaking at programs like this, writing op-eds, meeting with legislators, hopefully meeting with the governor. I've met recently with the new Education and Workforce Secretary, Hal Heiner. Had an opportunity to meet with the governor's chief of staff. And I understand, and we all understand, that at the end of the day, they have some very tough choices to make. But we believe deeply that the priorities that eventually the budget reflects has to include understanding the importance of creating the best educated, best trained workforce that we can.
You believe that will make the difference in the state's economy going forward?
Well, it will. You know, the governor last night in his speech talked about the fact that the best way to fix a lot of the governmental problems and challenges is to create a more robust economy. And the only way we're going to do that is with a workforce that meets the needs of 21st century employers.
Mr. King, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. We certainly hope you make it a good week ahead.